Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet. This podcast focuses on the intersection of sales, leadership, and personal development. Now let's get ready to dig in and crush it. Happy New Year, everyone. My husband Ryan and I actually took last week off so we could have just a little time to decompress and regroup, and we are ready to hit the ground running. One of the things that I get asked about all the time from clients, from people I work with, pretty much anyone, because it somehow ends up coming up randomly in discussions and just came up this morning in a discussion with a client on the phone, is boundaries. I strongly believe in setting boundaries. And for some people, it can be really difficult. Some people don't do it at all, which kind of surprises me and shocks me. And there can always be some anxiety, some stress, some concern, some discomfort around setting boundaries. But as you get more and more used to doing that and get more and more comfortable with your thought processes, and like I've always said, if I can look in the mirror and be comfortable with my decision and my judgment, then I'm pretty good with that. But a lot of people do really struggle with it. So I wanted to just talk about this a little bit today. And I had started to write this article probably like 3 or 4 months ago. And oftentimes, I'll have an idea, and I always believe in jotting your ideas down so they don't leave you. And I had started to actually just write this article and had it in my Word document folder. And I went to revisit it, and it became kind of long. So I thought, well, maybe this would be good for a podcast as an example. So my example is, when do you text and when do you email? So this is just an example in regards to setting boundaries of something that a lot of people have frustration around, and a lot of people don't have the courage to stand up and talk about, because sometimes you get these texts, they're, random, and you might be in the middle of doing something, but then you see someone's text and you're like, oh my gosh, do I need to get back to them? And then often they're very trite, which can often put you into a bad headspace. It's like responding to an email quickly has the same effect with a text, even worse sometimes. So sometimes texting, even though it is a great tool, and I do text a lot, by the way, but texting for business purposes and when you really need answers or you need to have a good record of something, it may not be your best choice. So hence I've learned to set boundaries around texting. And here are my tips for you if you so wish to try to set some boundaries around texting and emailing. Feel free to think about some of these tips and maybe implement them. Tip number 1. If someone texts me that I think I need to reply via email, or I wish it wasn't an email, often I respond back via email versus texting the person back. Just this natural way of responding, sometimes people just get the hint. And then it's an easy situation. You don't have the discomfort of a discussion or trying to tell someone how to be, and it just tends to work out. So that is tip number 1. And that is often, hopefully, one of the preferred ways. Number 2 is sometimes I take a moment to explain why I prefer emails over texting, and I share an example. It could be something like an order was lost that was texted and you had no record of it. So many people don't take time to explain something. They don't take time to explain the why. And as most people know and realize, communication is a top cause of a lot of issues. Just taking that time to pivot or even diffuse a situation by explaining something and giving an example can help people see your point of view and hopefully help them, or at least collaborate to come up with a compromise to remedy the situation. Number 3, texts tend to set off a must reply to me now vibe. Yes, they do. And the funny thing is when you actually then hurry to text someone back, often it's really not an urgent emergency and it could have waited. So my mind always goes to that book from when we were all kids, The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. And then I start to be in my mind like, oh my gosh, that's really not urgent. Why couldn't they just sent me an email? And your mind starts to go to all these different places and you're wasting your energy. And you really should just be focused on still getting your job done and other tasks and different calls or whatever you have to do for the day. So I like to try to dissipate any sense of royal urgency when it's not really urgent. Number 4, you can communicate to your client just quite simply that when you send an email, it just allows you some time to process and think and get back to them all the necessary information you need to get back to them in an email. Whereas in a text, you can't really give that much information. You might not be able to forward any documents or photos or links. I forward links to people all the time for people to review things, and I can't do that in a text. So then I have to switch them anyways to an email. And most people email from their phone. So that's why sometimes too, it's amazing to me that someone might be hell-bent on texting when, you know what, most people have their emails on their phone, so you can still see things, you can still email. And it's just makes it easier for record keeping. Which leads me to number 5. Emails are better for record keeping. You can get more information. It's easily printable. So that's a huge thing for me. Sorry if you are someone that is great on saving paper. I'll be really honest. I'm not. But I do reuse paper. So I do reuse it for scrap and other things. So I don't completely waste paper. And I try to use the other sides too. And it's savable. You can save the email. You can put it in folders. You can be really organized. And I love that. And it can be forwarded. Too many times, something that should have been emailed was sent in a text and then it was lost due to phone issues. Oh my gosh, I have had 2 phones within a year and a half. So when you get a new phone, all those texts are lost. Whereas when you have it in an email, you can save it. The bottom line for this tip in terms of text versus emails is sometimes you still might have to, quote unquote, suck it up and still work with someone via text. And I have that situation too. Luckily, I have been able to switch most people over to emails, but I do have some clients that still like to text. And for me, then it kind of goes back to my buckets, which is one of my earlier podcasts where I think to myself, okay, bucket number 1, bucket number 2, bucket number 3. And if you have a really amazing client, and this is my judgment, my opinion and choice, I guess you could say, is I have some really awesome clients, but they're still really low key and it still works for them to text me and that's fine. And they are a huge part of my business. So that's cool. And then I have some really teeny tiny little clients that are just super easy and it's no big deal. So I don't mind if they text me orders and different things like that too. So again, use your judgment. And at the end of the day, it's your choice and your decision on how you want to handle things. But I just thought this was an example in terms of how to set boundaries and a real life example about something that you have to set boundaries about. So a lot of podcasts, a lot of articles always talk about setting boundaries, but I often don't see real tangible examples where someone can think and go, oh yeah, that really drives me crazy when she sends me texts all the time. And like, it's so urgent, it's really not urgent. And then I don't have a record. So I hope that this helps some of you out there that might have something to do with that. And if you don't get bothered by emails or texts, but you just need to start thinking about setting some boundaries for some other things in your life, then I hope this podcast can be applicable to you as well. The one thing I will close with is I always take these steps for any situation. First is stopping and recognizing what's going on in the situation. So back to my example, if someone sent you a text and it really kind of makes your blood boil or makes you have some anxiety or tension or discomfort, just stop for a second. Stop and think about it. Reflect on it. If you need to accept it, just take a moment. We're all going so fast. And, quite frankly, it's not necessary. I often think to myself, I'm not a doctor. I'm not curing cancer. This can wait for a few minutes till I wrap my arms around it, my head around it, and figure it out. Then reflect. Think, if I answer it this way, what's this going to look like? Or if I answer it this way, what's this going to look like? And like I said earlier, if I feel like I can look in the mirror and feel happy about whatever my decision was at the end of the day, then that is a good thing. I feel good about that. And that's like an important thing. You have to feel good. You have to feel aligned with it. And just know that in your heart of hearts, you did your best and you were comfortable with your decision and you thought it through. And often too, take some breaths. More and more people are taking some time to breathe. Just sit for a second and take 3 deep breaths and let your mind clear before you respond. And that will also help shed some light, shed some clarity, just slow you down a little bit before you jump in and make some decision that maybe you're going to regret. And I know I just put a lot in a nutshell that probably a lot of people drag out and talk about more, and it's very valid. All that is extremely valid and extremely helpful. And maybe you already do it, which is awesome. And if you don't, I hope that maybe that's something that you will think about doing next time you are in a situation that is causing you just some discomfort, some stress, some anxiety, and you really need to just take a moment and think about things and be comfortable with how you're going to address it. So that's all I have this week. I hope this little podcast about boundaries resonates with you, even if it's to the level of email versus texting. I just know it's been interesting with texting over the past few years, and some fellow reps that I talk to, they struggle with it as well. They have not been setting boundaries around it. And it doesn't get any better, people. It doesn't get any better if you don't stand up for yourself and set boundaries. In general, it doesn't get any better. So once you get in the practice of setting boundaries and being comfortable with it and moving through it, you will be surprised. You will be so surprised at how things fall into place, and your energy is so much better and you feel just more aligned and more happy. And that's what you need to feel like. That's what you need to feel like to really serve and do a great job for your clients out there. Thank you for listening. You can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. My Instagram is Melinda_Van Fleet. And those are the 2 platforms I hang out on primarily. Feel free to check out my website, melindavanfleet.com, or you can email me, melinda@melindavanfleet.com. So till next time, I hope you crush it in sales. Thanks.